Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, I talk with youth development and public school education expert and my sister, Dr. Jenn Earl Foss. Check it out. Greetings, I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of grace. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I hope you know that in this moment, just as you are appreciated, you are valued, and you are loved. As you can see, I am not alone. I have an amazing guest. She goes by the name of Dr. Jenn Earl Foss. How's it going today?
Good, how are you?
Wonderful. So, if y'all didn't put that together, this is my big sister, who's super awesome. And she's not just my sister, though. Can you share a little bit about, just as an introduction, who you are, what you do, what you are passionate about, anything that comes to mind?
The list of passions is long, brother. I think we're going to be focused on what I spend a lot of my time doing, which is education. I'm a proud educator from Wisconsin, as you are. My undergrad is from Wisconsin, and I actually went there not to study education. I went there thinking I was going to do international relations and ended up studying feminist political theory. And as I studied politics, I came to realize education is really where you can change things for the better. And that became my mission.
And then what else happened? Then you became a teacher.
So I went to a private school in Madison it took me about 1.5 years to get my teaching license. And then ended up teaching in Arizona in South Phoenix for 10 years. While I did my master's degree. And then I moved to Tempe Unified, which is also in Arizona, adjacent to Phoenix, while I did my doctorate, both at Arizona State University. And when I finished that in 2006, I came to California, where we both are now.
Yep.
And I've been in Glendale Unified since 2006.
And then you got your doctorate as well?
I finished my doctorate at ASU while I was working in Tempe Unified. I was an administrator then and an assistant principal. When I came to California, I started as an assistant principal and became the proud principal of Hoover High School 10 years ago. This is my 10th year as principal.
And you once told me a statistic, maybe it's like only 5% of women have their PhD?
I would need to... That was a while ago.
Okay.
But it definitely is not a lot. It's growing. It's becoming more accessible.
And I know that you wouldn't take the credit because you're very humble and you're very team-oriented. So what are some of the accolades that you can speak to that your school has got? I know you all have a gold ribbon school. And can you speak to any of those kind of things?
Sure. Hoover High School we're 65% free and reduced lunch, so we receive funds to support families in poverty. We have over 20 dialects spoken at our school.
Wow.
We don't have as much transiency, like students coming in and out, as new students coming every year.
Okay.
So throughout the year, there are students coming from all kinds of countries, mostly students of Armenian descent, but it's actually been quite beautiful recently. We have seen major growth in other areas, so I like to describe my school as international, quite frankly. It's fun, though, the languages you hear as you're walking across campus to talk to students and learn. And as a school, with all that diversity, we have to provide a lot of opportunities for students, and we have received recognition for our PBIS program, which is Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, which aligns very well with the dissertation study that I did. We could talk more about that later. We're a silver school. We're also silver on U.S. News and World Report. We are a gold ribbon school, both for being a performing arts school and visual arts, for our program that we do with walkthroughs, and for being Title I, and that our students do well, even though we're Title I.
That's wonderful.
Thanks.
So that was the bio part. And I always say to people that I get the honor of interviewing amazing people like you. And you're my sister, so this is extra special. But I always start the interview by saying that a bio can only capture so much of the amazingness someone is. So what would you say, if you really knew me, you'd know that?
Wow. I'm tough.
What does that mean?
I don't give up. I will see a puzzle. Puzzles intrigue me. So I'm comfortable looking at things from like the large, big picture and putting the puzzle together to find solutions. And while I get tired and stressed out like everybody else, I will just keep going until we find the answer.
So since we're both into youth development, and actually our most popular episodes usually revolve around youth development or social work, you know, the question of, I don't know. I think because it's also something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a lot of like extra pitch and toss, but I just think, like you said, that a lot of us intuitively know that this is where we need to have this conversation.
Yeah.
So, you know, nurture versus nature, right? So for you, toughness, and you can expand education, was that a nurture, a nature? Where do you think your toughness has come from?
My father's, I don't know if he did it with you, but with me, because he was alone with me for many years. My birth mother was not around, you know, after about kindergarten. So my dad and I were together, and he just always would say, Jennifer, be tough, be tough. Recently, he's let up on that a little bit with some things we've had happening. But yeah, it was definitely nurtured. Most definitely. Figure it out. Be tough.
What role did education play when you were growing up?
I went public school all the way, and I think it's why I'm such a proponent of public schools. So yeah, half-day kindergarten through public universities all the way through, except the year and a half at Edgewood College in Madison.
I was always the kid in the hallway at school, especially first through third. But when I look back on my role of education in my life, it was fourth grade that a teacher inspired pride. Like I remember she had a vocabulary list, maybe 10 words, and that I took pride in memorizing it as a task. Not necessarily that I cared about the words themselves, but that like pride in education. Was there ever a moment in your life where when you were, you know, evolving as a human, where you found as a young person, you know, that like, oh, I like school, or, you know, kind of like, can you talk about that?
I liked school. We're from a very small town, and I went to the public school in that town because things like Girl Scouts, there were opportunities for me to be a part of something. You know, there were babysitters at my house. Dad was working a lot. And so I think for me, it was really about connecting to the school. Athletics, music was my life. At school and at church, music was my life. I was blessed to play many instruments and have incredible music teachers. So I think it wasn't academia as much as it was the nurturing that was happening at the school, if they knew it or not.
Now that I'm kind of an older person, or older than when I was younger.
I used to change his diapers.
Yes.
Let's
older than that. I used to have a different view of what it meant to get your PhD. And a lot of it that I now realize is that I see where people, I'm like, oh yeah, PhD is meant for you, is this love for research or this love for reading or studying. And that's why so much of me is like, not for me, because research, like reading a bunch, sitting still in class, like no thanks. Has getting your PhD, this road of, you know, education, has it always been easy for you, or this person where you just read something once and you're, oh, I got it?
No. And I just want to clarify, I have an EDD.
Okay.
In education, they offer a doctorate for working educators.
Okay.
PhD is when you plan on working at the university, which I had to learn the hard way. I applied 3 times to Arizona State, and they turned me down every time and said, no, we want you in our EDD program.
Okay.
So I just do want to clarify that.
I always do that.
I don't know that there's much difference, but I think it's important to know. No, I think mine was emotional. I was trying to prove something. Coming from not much, I think there was something I was not aware of that I was trying to prove myself. I just kept pushing through all the way till the end. I mean, I was a student from kindergarten until I was 30-some years old when I finished my doctorate in 2006. Nonstop.
So what advice would you have for maybe a young woman who, or an older woman, but where you were, in your 20s, thinking, do I want to get my master's? Do I want to get my EDD? I know I'm going to have to work like tons of jobs to do it. And like reading and all those things, I think you're really smart, but it's not like for some people, it's just boom, that's their gift. Reading and that for you, it's actual work, that toughness. What's your advice to them where they have that desire, but maybe that fear or they're feeling a little apprehension of that big to-do list, that big hurdle that it would take to really envision themselves getting that EDD or that PhD?
That's a really great question, and I don't think it's that much different for a high schooler than it is for an adult deciding if they want to do graduate work. You have to figure out the best way for that you learn, and the sooner you can become in touch with what helps it resonate and stick, the sooner you're going to be more successful. I'm a special needs student. I am ADD. I have some processing issues. I didn't even come to realize that until I was getting my master's degree in educational leadership. And my special ed teacher, who was teaching me how to teach special ed students, took me out of class and said, do you have an IEP? It's an individual plan for students with special needs. I'm like, I'm not identified. I recognize I have special needs. So I've actually been a student who has struggled and it wasn't identified. It was the toughness. But with that said, because of that personal experience I've had, I always am saying, especially when I was a teacher, but now when I work with students I see struggling, talk to me. What works for you? And students have so many more distractions now than I did, than we did, both of us. But what I would say for adults and women, but just all adults who are looking at graduate work, the master's degree is usually it's tangible. It will get you more money on a pay scale in education, for example. Or it will help you teach a class you wanted to teach. But the doctorate, my advice is always, unless you have a dissertation to write, unless you have something to say, I don't suggest it, because the purpose of the doctorate is, of course, to become an expert in your field, but then also to put a body of research out there that we've not seen. It's funny now, I finished in '06. Over 10 years later, I've started thinking about going back for another one because I have so many things I want to research, that now that I've been in the business for so long.
And what was it that your research was on?
It's a classroom management theory I have. I believe in respect and relationships with students, high expectations instead of rules. My belief is that when you post a list of rules on the wall, you were kind of this kid.
I was thinking this is me. What you're about to describe is me.
This is what Tom Earl would do in class. When he wanted to get kicked out of class, he would look at the list on the wall and think, number 3 is really going to make her mad. I'm going to do that one right now, and I get to get kicked out of class. It's you list the things that irritate you on the wall. And there are theories, the Harry Wongs, that say, don't smile till Christmas, make sure they know your rules. I believe, and what I did was work with beginning teacher all the way through a veteran teacher and have them explore, why do you have the classroom expectations you do? What does it mean to you? And once we went through that, then I said, let's try this. Let's see what actually knowing your students' names and building a relationship with them and having trust and then holding them up here will do. And so I had different results, but overall they all felt much more comfortable managing their classrooms instead of trying to keep their thumb on everybody,
For the people who are listening that are saying, oh, that makes sense, can you talk a little bit about how that's a different way of looking at things? It's not, especially when you were coming up, it's not the system, that it's almost counter system.
It is to a lot of people. And, the staff that I work with is everything from a first-year teacher to people who have been in the business for over 30 years teaching. And I think what I have found based on my research, but also being in education for a while, is most of us teach and discipline the way we were taught and disciplined. And when we went to school, there were rules on the wall, and we were just told to follow them. And society has changed, and kids have changed, and they're empowered to ask questions. And quite frankly, how can you become the person you're going to be if you're just held to this specific norm, rather than I get to make the decision to participate in this small community I'm in for 55 minutes a day. To me, it's a more adult It's how we're treated when we go to university. There is an expectation that a professor doesn't stand in the front of the room and say, don't talk, don't use your cell phones, don't go to the bathroom. You are expected to act like a human being and be respectful and responsible.
Yeah.
And students will do that in high school. I'm speaking to high school specifically.
Because in middle school, they're monsters.
I could never do that. God bless every middle school educator out there.
I always say especially when I was taking contracts, like, anything but middle.
I'm a 6th grade and 10th grade. All of you who have 10th graders, I promise next year it's going to be better. 10th grade is really when students figure it out. But 6th grade too, ooh, no. They're aliens. They don't even know their own bodies.
So a lot of where my work intersected with yours was I was doing anti-bias training for educators in California because California educators were, it was shown, they were cited that students that were black and brown were being disproportionately suspended, expelled, disciplined. And I forget the word because I've been out of it, but it was for it wasn't from cut and dry things. It's where you can make the decision yourself. It's like leniency, discipline. What's that?
It's the classroom things that we're talking. I'm not sure what the word you're looking for is. It may come to me in a minute, but it's specifically for classroom disruptions, defiance.
Defiance. There's the word. Yeah.
So, and it's because they don't understand the rules. Specifically, when you're in a classroom that has black students, and let's say they have a white teacher or any race, choose any race, and they have been raised in you sit and listen, and you can even go to places of worship. Many places of worship, you sit and you're quiet and you listen. Yeah. Whereas in black churches, you respond and that's expected and you acknowledge. Somebody might say in class, I went to a movie this weekend, and a black student is apt to say, me too, it's so good, because there's a term for it, that feedback.
Call and response.
Is part of the culture, and students are being disciplined for that, instead of there being an understanding of why those students are responding. They're engaging, not being disrespectful. And that's when it clashes. And so you don't have a relationship with that student. You don't understand them. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah. That's the issue. And in California, it's like we can't suspend for defiance.
Anymore. After this came out. Do you want to talk about that?
I mean, it's rooted in my research, so I'm comfortable with it. At my school, personally, we've been moving in that direction. When it officially passed, I sent it out to my staff and said, thank goodness we've been doing the work we've been doing. We're going to be able to move in this direction much easier. So I'm comfortable with it. I support it.
Because why don't you talk a little bit about the cycle that happens? You kick a student out, then what happens? How does it not or does solve the problem?
There are technical terms for it. I'm just going to use...
Yeah, do your thing.
The two of us talking. Okay. Imagine when you make a mistake. And even if culturally we don't agree, but I know this is what my teacher or this authority figure wants. I've broken this rule. I feel bad. Now what do? We kick you out. We alienate you further. That you just continue to build this wall between what you want from the student and how they're feeling. I mean, that's what suspension does. You send them away for 4 days when they know they've made a mistake for the most part. Are there students who have no idea they've made a mistake? Yes, and they need a lot more help. But it's not being sent home, probably to their home where there's no structure. They're not being punished at home. That's been my experience. The parents and guardians will say, I'm working all day. What do you want me to do with this kid? Exactly. So the student's sitting at home playing video games, eating whatever they want, and that is supposed to make sure they behave better when they come back? No, they feel alienated. They don't trust you. Many times they feel they were correct for doing whatever they did. It's their culture, or they were hurt, or there's something going on at home, so they acted out. And then we send you away. It just emboldens. No, that's not the right word. Increases that sense of I don't belong here.
Exacerbates it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Because I was thinking, when I was younger, 1st through 3rd, I was a little bit of a rebel, but a lot of it was I just had this uncontrollable energy. And, my teachers just didn't know.
What's this 1st through 3rd stuff?
Well, I think I remember being out in the hall the most first through third
When
grade.
you say out in the hall, were you being punished?
Yeah, I was kicked out of class.
Shut up.
And told to sit in the hallway. And I just sit on the ground all by myself in this hallway.
And so, like, let's process that.
That's what I'm saying.
How did you feel?
That I wasn't like when it was like, you were saying, like, when I see the list, I'm going to break that rule. Mm-hmm. What I think is that I developed that as a way to, it was almost like nurtured in me that when I come back, it's like, well, let me take this on as an identity then. But then it was literally those, for like, it was just, I couldn't control myself. It was just like, ah! That dad said then he put me on the ice and I'd play hockey and then I'd finally be like, I had somewhere I could spend that energy.
Yes.
But otherwise, and that was a lot of the reasons I was sent out. And then I think then I started to take on a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. Like, well,
okay.
let me own this.
Yeah.
And then let me break the rules.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
But fourth through whenever, I wasn't kicked out in the hallways, but it was those early years.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. And that's one of my, throughout, I think I have learned this, but I've learned to articulate it maybe in the last 3 years. There is a humility that is a necessity of educators, especially as a leader. But what is a teacher? A leader. Mm-hmm. They are responsible for about 150 students a year to raise them up. And you have to be humble enough that if there is a student like that, don't take it personally. It's not about you. There's something going on with that kid. And one of my struggles is so many educators take negative behavior personally. I do it. I lose it sometimes when I can just think of moments. There's been a student who just has taken it to that level that all of a sudden I'm hurt and I bite back. But I will tell you what, when I calm down, I am apologizing to that student. As the principal of a school, I will say, I'm sorry I lost my cool. You hurt my feelings. That made me feel awful when you said that to me. The level of disrespect was beyond what I could tolerate. And I'm very sorry I responded. That's not what an adult should do. You know, again, you have to be humble enough. And even with a teacher, too. But, right, I have to have relationships with both adults and kids. And if I make a mistake, I have to own up to it. You have to be humble. It's not about us.
So, since we're in the agreement, there's this other voice that's like, and I get it, like a teacher comes, they want to teach. You know, there's knowledge to share. And there's kids in the classroom who can learn in that way. So, then, you know, the argument is, like, kids should go there to learn. Those kids that are ruin it for the other kids, then the teacher just spends all their time on this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like get them out of there, put them in another class. If they can't handle it, get them out of there. Like what is when you hear questions or responses or movements or laws or politicians with this kind of intonation, invoking this line of thought, how do you respond? What are your thoughts?
It's a common conversation every day.
Yeah.
I have major compassion for the teachers in the rooms that are trying to make it work. More and more we are pushing towards immersion. So in a classroom, my teachers will have students with special needs, students who don't speak the language, and then a student who is right on track and has everything they need. The scaffolding that is expected of educators right now is higher than ever. It's a lot. And so while I sound very like, you have to accept every student in that classroom and do your best, I absolutely recognize that more is being asked of teachers right now than ever. So what I would do in this situation is ask you, what do you think a successful classroom looks like? I think another clash of veterans in the business and people who are teaching like they were taught is what you described. Sit there and listen. I think you said they have knowledge to share. It is my personal philosophy that knowledge can be looked up at any moment. Right now, if you and I couldn't think of something, we could grab our phone and look it up. You don't need to memorize things. You need to know how to do things. You need to know how to think. You need to know how to put puzzles together. So what should classrooms look like? We're going through this huge transition right now that classrooms should reflect the fact that, I mean, you are doing a job you never could have imagined when you were in high school. You and I can't imagine the jobs that high schoolers are going to be doing. Yes. We are preparing them for things we can't even imagine. So the best thing we can do is teach them the soft skills of interpersonal, executive functioning, how to think critically, how to be respectful, of all of those things, and the knowledge will come. So I think it's switching from there is a teacher at the front of the room to share their knowledge and stick it in your head and make you memorize it, to we are creating environments where students can learn at their pace, and we're more like conductors or coaches.
I'm with you.
Okay.
But we're also talking about an element of power here.
Get over it.
So let's make it explicit that before the teacher, I have the power.
Yeah.
What does power look like in what you're describing?
I would, rather than power, I would say empower. It is your job to empower, and that's powerful.
So power is more like a shared, communal. For there's the authority. What does the authority look like? For the people who are trying to scratch that itch out of this conversation, how do you have it not become chaos and, well, I can do whatever I want, right? Because you can't kick me out, and student-centered and
So, I mean, I want to be careful not to get too like educationese in this conversation. There are things we're doing specifically. For example, at my school, there's a lot of, I know you know about restorative justice, but before restorative justice, there's building community. I would say something that hurts me to my core more than anything is when I walk in a classroom and I say, Mr. Earl, can I see Joe? And the teacher will look at me and they have to pull their sheet out to see where Joe is sitting because they don't even know who Joe is. If the teacher doesn't know the students' names, then you need authority. That teacher has to act like this, top down, because there is zero relationship. But if we start to operate our classrooms where, for example, we're doing community circles throughout my school, we're training our teachers to run community circles, and we've got a lot of, I'm not a therapist, I don't need to be, opening up and hearing kids' problems. That's not what it's about. It's about sitting in a circle with 30 students, making sure they know each other's names, and the kid who maybe would have never spoken to the other student, and the prompt for the day is, what's your favorite fast food? And you find out, we're both vegetarians. We don't like fast food. Oh my gosh, he and I have something in common. It just creates these little nuggets of we are a community. And people, when they're in a community, will act respectfully. It doesn't mean they're not going to have a bad day, but have compassion, be humble in that moment. It's not about kicking them out. It's about calling down and saying, I have a student in need. Can someone help them? It's a different approach to it. That's what my study was about. If you hold kids to high expectations, they will rise to them. It's a fact. I can name the students I felt I could not change on two hands. And I've been in this business hardcore since 97, and I can name them.
So that power of relationships really leads to that total transformation.
In my personal and professional opinion, yes.
Mine too. It's like with siblings or with anybody you have a close relationship with, there's just more rapport. There's more ability to assume best intentions, that when a conflict or a disagreement does arise, that something within me wants to work it out quicker, or wants to give you the benefit of the doubt, or rise to what makes you happy. And it makes sense when you share that when that's not there, then what else do you use to, now it goes into control, into authority, into... There's one podcast I like to listen to. His name's Jocko, and he's a Navy SEAL. And he says, even in the military, he hates when people stereotype that. You can't make people do things by saying, I told you so.
Yep.
Even in this thing that we think is so stereotypically, I told you so, that it doesn't even work. So in something where you sign up to be told what to do.
Isn't that crazy?
Why would you think kids would do it, young people?
And there's so much research behind self-efficacy and feeling like I am capable, and part of this is when human beings succeed. So that's not just in the classroom, that's at jobs. I mean, when you think of it, coaching is the same thing. When you sign up to play on a sports team, you sign up to be told what to do by that coach. But the greatest coaches of all time, they write books and we follow their philosophies. They've built strong communities with high expectations, and I only have about 1,500 students at my school, close to 1,600, but I can look across, a mile across the quad and give a kid a look and they'll stop. I don't even need to say a word. And they'll say, it's because you're the principal. Oh no, because there are students who will say whatever they need to say to my face. Believe me, it's not because of my title. It's because they know I care. And when I see a student getting defiant, then it's, hey, come to the side. I'm not going to yell at them and humiliate them. I take them to the side and say, you have to help me understand what's going on. I'm not disrespecting you right now. I've not raised my voice. I've not cursed at you. Please help me understand why you're talking to me this way right now. And 90% of the time, the student will say, I'm sorry, I'm really angry right now. And then, okay, let's go walk. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes.
And there's always something behind
always.
the anger.
Kids are dealing with so much. I can't relate to looking to my phone to feel better about myself. But there is so much invested with our young people of the number of likes and the comments. And students will say things on their phones through a screen that they would never say to someone's face. So now as educators, we're dealing with, oh, you don't know how to have conversations because you'll say anything with your thumbs. And then when you have to face that person as a human, you don't even know how to do it. So part of the business of schools is becoming teaching students how to even have relationships. Yeah?
I'm like 50-50 on this. I think that has always been there. It's just expressed itself differently. It's true that when I got home, I couldn't bully you from home, but I would lose myself in video games or other forms of escapism. And I think at the same time, it's also giving young people a way to use their voice that we really haven't seen
there's
since
so much positive. Yes.
So I think it's like both. I think a lot of those problems are being amplified that have been there for every generation. And I think that, like I always share with people a quote that's, tell me what technology this is. And they say, ever since the invention of blank, people no longer are no longer going to talk to each other. They're just going to have their heads in it. And I'm like, what technology is this? I'm like, it's the written word. I believe Socrates was like, now that we're writing things down,
we're not going to
people are just going to read it.
You know, and you're reminding me, I think I just deal so much with the bullying from home. And the parents and guardians always want to put it on the school. And I'm like, this happened under your watch. Why am I fixing this? Which is a whole nother conversation. But I remember in grad school at Arizona State, we read a book called Bullying for Columbine. And that would have been maybe 99. So we're just coming out of flip phones. The social media is just on the onset. And I remember in that book, the author saying that it's a new form of community that we need to understand. And I've forgotten that. So thank you for reminding me of that. Because it is a community. Yeah. They are sharing.
So I was having a conversation earlier this week, and we were talking about education. So I was thinking, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to be interviewing my sister. So here's what her trajectory looked like.
Okay.
When she was in school, she never thought that she was a good student. School had no application to her life. There's nobody inspiring her. So she more or less got one of those, just show up and I'll pass you, right? So then she never considered even going to college. That was the end of her career. So then on her own, she learned how to be a beautician, studied that on her own. And then she learned how to be, she studied her real estate license all by herself online, passed it in her first try. So I don't know if people know, but it's a really hard test. Usually you don't study it on your own, and usually you don't pass in the first try. And now she's studying, she decided she's going to learn Amazon's web-based whole entire world. And she's studying that on her own, and she'll probably pass on her own. And so I was saying to her, like, you are really good at learning. Like, for me, when I learn things, I have to be able to walk around the room. Like, I have to do a bunch of things. But, like, you're actually really good at reading something, retaining it. Like, you could, like, if you had known you had this within you, mastered anything. Like, if you knew you had this confidence, whereas you're discovering it now in your 30s. And she's like, I now realize I wish I would have went to college. I probably would have liked it. Probably would have excelled at it. And so we were saying, this long story, how can we make sure that kids can discover when they're younger that, like, you do have this ability to master something that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be this cookie cutter way of success, but that people aren't discovering in their 30s, 40s, 50s that, you know, maybe I actually can do this or am smart or those kind of things. Complex question, I know.
Well, see, I would challenge it. I would say she has mastered things.
Agreed.
When you go to undergrad, I mean, unless you know you want to be a teacher or you know you want to be a nurse practitioner or whatever it might be, You just go learn. I will have students as seniors in my office crying, calling me a night crying because they don't know what they want to do. And I'm like, you can't know what you want to do for the next 30 years at 17. You're going to figure that out in college. But we've created a society where undergrad is essentially where you grow. And I don't know if that's changed. I don't know if that used to happen in high school, but that's a lot of money to spend to become a young adult.
Yeah.
You do learn more complex thinking. You do learn how to live more independently. But again, unless you know exactly what you're going to undergrad for, it sounds like she did great for herself. She has a beautician's license. She has a real estate license. And quite frankly, she was probably bored in school. From what you're describing, now we're looping back to what I was saying about scaffolding. You can't ignore the top kid because they will just take care of themselves because it's easy for them. So how do you challenge them? I mean, some of the questions we ask is, I always say, how do you know if the student knows what you want them to know? And so you have to reteach if they don't. But what about the ones who already know it? Are you aware of the kids in the class who already know how to do what you're teaching? Give them something else. So again, that scaffolding is massive. I think everybody has their own path. College is another way to do it. Everybody doesn't have to do it. And in California, the community college system is incredible.
Yes.
So the 2-year pathway to transfer to university is I have great respect for that pathway, especially in California.
I like where we went, but it helped me clarify.
Answer your question.
I guess it's that, like, people, so her experience and other people's like it, it's not that I think kids should know that what they want, but it's that she didn't think she was smart. Like, that she didn't think she was stupid, but, people that don't think, like, I'm not smart enough to master learning real estate by myself, or, where you start to think that because I wasn't good at school, I must not be smart. And since I'm not smart, I probably can't learn this new thing. Or, that you start to lose your confidence when everything's measured by, as we've been talking about, your ability to learn, regurgitate. And if consistently, it seems, at least for my generation and before, maybe it's changed now, but that young people, if you didn't fit into that mold, that you got the message that you're not smart, that you can't just all of a sudden think, I want to learn this thing. And so you have that confidence to then go do it. So how can we instill that in young people, that confidence in their ability to master or learn something or problem solve or figure it out beyond the memorize and, replay?
So my answer to your question was looping back to the scaffolding.
Okay.
But let's talk about bigger picture at a school. For example, I have, I think, 5 career pathways at my school. All of my art teachers are working artists. So you can come to my school and pretty much major in the arts. And you could go to work afterwards, or you're going to leave the school confident enough to go straight to art school. Like, we will build that path for you. I think it's, like you said, the traditional way was memorize and regurgitate.
Yeah.
That's definitely changing. Again, with Common Core really did start to bring in, I know a lot of people like to talk nonsense about it, but it started to move us away from memorize and spit out to, you have to be able to work through a problem. It's about reading comprehension. It's that those are the skills that we're looking at more than can you memorize A, B, and C. The AP program is still a lot of memorization. So a student who tries to take an AP class, maybe that doesn't resonate with them, they may get that feeling. But if you have many other offerings where they can feel success in school and leave with skills, then I think we're able to help instill that. I mean, we have an auto shop academy, and it goes into a 4-year degree. So the students leave our school with 2 years left of a 4-year degree at the college that articulates with my school. We have an early college academy, and it primarily focuses on students who are the middle student, not your AP students. So it's as a school then having a vision, do I have something for every kind of kid, right?
Let's talk, you nailed it, that was awesome.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about then policy and systemically public school and specifically access. So I went to an awesome implicit bias training a couple weeks ago by Dr. Marks.
Oh.
And so he was talking about, when we talk about, you have the situation, the circumstance, or the person. And so we blame a lot of things on people rather than acknowledging circumstances. For example, when people are going into schools and they're being reviewed if they, if they're going to get in or not. And I know this is more nuanced than I'm making it, but let's say a student has 4.3 GPA and another student has a 3.8 or 3.9, right? So then you're saying, oh, the 4.3 would traditionally get it if it's the who's the smartest, etc. But then the reason you're able to get above a 4 point something is because you have advanced placement classes that give you a weighted grade.
Right.
But if your school doesn't even have AP classes, then there's no way you could ever even achieve that GPA because there's not the access to those classes that will give you that good GPA. So it's not about smarts, it's not about the person, it's about access. So for, there's a lot of schools that aren't blessed to have as many things as you described, where they have auto mechanics, good arts. A lot of that stuff's being cut away. So it's bare bones. It's the schools where it's the most underpaid, underexperienced teachers with a demographic that has the most amount of needs systemically. That, huge problem. What is the conversations that you see being had, or what are your thoughts that you have personally on moving towards acknowledging and working towards solutions and equity within that?
I mean, I would look to the leadership and I'll only speak to California, but everything that we're offering the students at my school is because we have a majority of students who are on free and reduced lunches. The state of California offers tons of money for career programs. The district is not coming up with that. They're coming up with some. We have to be able to support the program. But we just received, I think, a $250,000 grant. I'm starting another pathway for careers in education and opening up a child care center to have a lab on the campus. That the district has not come up with that money. We're taking it from the state. So leadership needs to be more resourceful. It's looking at the funds that you receive because you have students on free and reduced lunch. It's called Title I monies, and using them effectively, making sure that you're, again, looking at the full picture. Where do I have holes? What students aren't being served? And making sure you fill in those. I blame the leadership if that's not happening. Because those resources, I mean, that's at the school and district level if they're not providing those opportunities. And there are amazing teachers in the toughest schools. Your best teachers are at your toughest schools. You go to a school where the students all look the same, those teachers are not working as hard as the teachers in the schools with students with challenges. The scaffolding's not happening. The students will just sit there and listen. It's their support from home.
So do you think this is a little bit of the picture I'm painting is not quite as what I'm saying? I
think there's opportunities to offer what they need, and the leadership's not taking advantage of it.
So the school I'm describing, it's not like, so even in places like Alabama or the South, where even the governor on that level is, probably a racist, probably wants to take away people's rights, and, is it in those states, or is it because we're kind of blessed to live where we do?
We're very blessed in California. I mean, anyone who's receiving Title I funds should be looking at the full picture, and again, the leadership has to make sure every person's filling out the application to receive the money. But that I would have to see the school. Just like with students, one of my big mantras is case by case. I need to see the school, see the leadership, see the population, because we shouldn't assume all families in need are the same. They have different needs. There are cultural differences of families in need, so we have to fill those holes and support those kids. And I have kids that I'm supporting, that this is honest, I'm a little uncomfortable saying it, that the parents and guardians don't know, because the student wants something so different for their life. And it might be something happening with them personally. It might be that they want to go to college, and in their culture they're meant to be married, given away to another family and married at 17. So they have to figure out how to get themselves out. Relationships, case by case.
So let's use then your school as a case study, since you're so familiar with it and you can speak specifically to it. A lot of the questions that I posted, what are questions y'all have? I'm going to have an expert on. And they were so young people that have so much needs economically, systemically, being discriminated against. How do educators serve those students? And if there's anything you can be specific on it at your school, the needs that you see with English as a second language or anything like that you can speak to how y'all address that?
I would say the biggest struggle that I haven't figured out yet is how to get the families engaged. Many of them are working many jobs. Do we get them in at the lunch hour? I was just at a conference where a superintendent said that she has started offering lunch and learns because so many parents and guardians work in the evenings, but everybody has a lunch break. So try to work with them in their lunch break. So I would say my biggest challenge that I still don't have figured out is getting the families in, because the more the families understand, the more they can support their student. The things that systemically I see working are the community circles. I'm seeing a big difference. What else do I think systemically is working with those students? Free services as much as possible, the free tutoring, the free writing labs. Again, though, that takes, come on, Tom, you need to come to writing lab. They're not going to go themselves. They don't have a parent or guardian making sure they're doing it. So our schools are working overtime to support those students. That's a fact. They need therapy. We need therapy. It's missing. We don't have it. I just met with my superintendent this week because the county is looking to open a health center on my campus and they want to offer everything but therapy. I'm like, I need therapists. Students are stressed and have anxiety and they're depressed. It's an epidemic, quite frankly. So any public services we can get. There was a speaker at the conference I presented at last weekend who was working in Salt Lake, I believe it was. No, Park City, Utah. And they had an issue. It's a fentanyl-based drug that students were able to get shipped to their homes with nothing on the package. And It was a highly lethal. It wasn't fentanyl, but a derivative of fentanyl. And the reason I'm bringing this story up is I was extremely inspired because when she told the story of what she did, and 2 students lost their lives back to back that had ordered this drug, and they had the DEA and they had suicide prevention teams and they had all these teams come in. And when she really started to dig in, she started breaking FERPA laws and calling pediatricians. She started going to emergency rooms. She was talking to every single group she could in Park City to understand what was happening with students. And that's really inspiring to me. We're starting to see an uptick of gang activity in our city, again, the city I work in. And as I was working with police officers this week, I started hearing her voice and thought, we work like this and we need to be working like this. Police and schools need to be sharing information. We can't work in isolation. If we're going to serve communities in need, doctors, police, therapists, everybody who serves families in need to be talking. Because right now we're working in these separate units and maybe we're not even complementing each other. So that's a really huge thing that's like swimming in my head right now. Schools of 4,000, Tom, I don't know how they're getting to the kids. I don't know how they're doing case by case. A school of 2,000, you can get to the kids. You can systemically organize your school so that you have people looking out for all the different groups and bringing the student in and saying he's in pain. Let's get him help. He's acting out.
When you were describing the different roles, like police officers, social workers, pediatricians, they all have more or less a role.
Yeah.
There's ways you can gravitate one way or the other. In this community, holistic community that you described, what role does the education system, what role do educators play?
Right now, I feel like we're expected to play all of them. I'm expected to be the parent, be the therapist, and educate them. It's like education comes at the end, especially when you work in schools where there are students in need. We're serving everything else before we can get them an education. And that's why I say we're missing the parent-guardian piece. My most frustrating conversation is when a student is being defiant and the parent or guardian will say, he or she's on his phone all night long. I can't get him to... I'm like, take the phone. Oh, no, I can't do that. Do you pay for the phone? Yes, I pay for the phone. And I hear myself teaching the parent how to be a parent. I'm not even a parent. But I do know kids need boundaries. People need boundaries and systems. That's another one of my mantras. People like to know what's expected of them. So the more clear you can be, or these are my expectations, and stick with them, you and I both know erratic behavior when we think this is what's expected of us, and then all of a sudden this day I want this. Now we're going, wait a minute, I thought this is where I was supposed to be, and you're telling me to be here. So the more we can get parents and guardians and everyone in the community expecting the same things of the kids, we'll start to see some change, but also because they'll feel safe. They'll be like, this is the definition of what it means to be successful and healthy and happy.
You'd mentioned the conference that you were at last week? Was it last week?
I think so.
Last week when this was recorded. And I was really enjoying following along with a lot of the topics that were being given. And I believe yours was on self-care for women leaders.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about, if you could give us kind of, if we were in that room, what you talked about and why that topic really matters?
I think that as educators specifically, but female leadership, we are caretakers. It's like in our souls to be caretakers. And it's the old adage that you can't take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself. And I see female leaders, you just see the look on their face, but I don't have time. And they'll say it out loud. And there is science behind, if you're not taking care of your parasympathetic, if you're not feeding that part of your nervous system, you're in fight and flight mode. You can't center yourself and make good decisions. And so my recommendation is always, accept that there is a science behind it. And intentionally create time and space to center yourself. You can do this through journaling in the morning. I kind of take people through an exercise of what is your morning routine, what brings you joy, and actually take the time to intentionally infuse that into your life. I walk them through practices of breathing, and then finally intentionally planning movement in your day, in your life. Everyone thinks they have to work out 6 days a week, and that's the only way to be healthy. Have a standing desk. Do walk and talk meetings instead of just sitting. I kind of get them thinking about how can you have intentional movement, choosing joy, having a routine that centers you in the morning, and we talk about that.
It reminds me of this study that I saw that just blew my mind and brought so much self-awareness of making sure that I'm not this guy. Is they were showing, so how men, if they're married to, women, there's there's a trend towards they have better health outcomes. They take better care of themselves, all these kind of things. But then women that are married to men, that they actually are more likely to have negative health outcomes. And it's because for a lot of men, because we're socialized to not, be emotionally responsible, take care of ourselves, these kind of things. Wives become everything. They become the caretaker, the admin, they become your mom, but also your only friend, all of these kind of things.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that also translates to women in leadership.
That's a very good
that women have connection. To be all of those things as well.
My poor husband, I'll come home and I cannot make another decision. Please just make the decision. I do it all day long. And as educators, and I think both of our businesses, when you're in the business of human beings, you have to be able to articulate, I can't be in human space right now. You have to intentionally say, I need to decompress and not be in conversation. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is, as women specifically, it's okay. And in fact, it's for your own health. So you can be a better leader, You started to talk about a little bit of exercise at the end there. And so I get to know this. So do you want to share what is a venture or a passion that you've recently discovered? So I broke my ankle, 2 years ago now maybe, and I had gone through physical therapy after a different surgery I had, and when I came out of the broken ankle, I said, I don't want to do the physical therapy again. I saw this new Pilates studio in my neighborhood. Can I get your clearance to go do Pilates? And I worked with a private instructor, and now I take classes, and this summer I started my certification to be a Pilates instructor. And I'm really excited because again, working in a free and reduced population with, families in need, anyone can do Pilates on the floor. And so I've, gone and worked with some of my students, and I hope as I get trained, I'll be working with more athletes. I've been talking to the coaches, and my vision is that then they will take that home to their families and say, hey, guess what I did with Dr. Earl today,
That's amazing.
Thank you.
So before we had started the interview, you had mentioned that And you had the intention of dedicating this episode to somebody. Do you want to talk about that?
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Today, what is the date today? Today is October 5th.
Yes.
And it is my mother-in-law's birthday, who we recently lost to cancer. So I wanted to dedicate this time to her spirit because she is definitely with us today and always, and was an educator herself. So I'm carrying on her spirit.
That's wonderful.
Thanks, brother.
Yes, I appreciate you sharing that. So what is something you'd like people to take away about any misconceptions they have about educators or education or the work that y'all are doing?
A misconception. I think the only rub I feel, again, is that there's this deep pressure for schools to be everything. But we don't see... And you hear that, educators aren't paid enough and all those kinds of things from leaders, but you don't hear anyone, I'm all about systems.
Yeah.
I like systems. If you're gone tomorrow, will it continue? You don't hear people systemically talking about how we can support schools. Saying, we don't pay educators enough is not getting into the schools and seeing how can we make things better. And so... I don't know it's as much of a misconception. Just paying teachers more won't necessarily make the difference. It will help. We do some of the most important work in society, but it's not respected, or we would be paying them more. It's not supported. You don't see parents and guardians coming to the schools. We need the community to support the school and not expect it to be the parent and the therapist and the physical fitness instructor and the academic instructor. It takes everybody to support schools.
And then lastly, for your peers, any educators or faculty or staff that might be listening to this, is there any words of encouragement or anything that you'd like to share, any gratitude, anything you'd like to share before we start to wrap up this awesome time together?
I love our profession. I think my greatest joy is working with new teachers. I love to hire and bring people into our profession. And I want to circle back to encouraging all educators to really reflect on our role and be humble in when we're working with youth, that the behaviors you see, the challenges you see, they're not about you. And we have this higher calling to empower and elevate young people. It's not about us telling them what they need to know. I want to remind and send as much positive energy as I can to educators, because the work of lifting someone up is a calling. And if you've forgotten it, if you're a vet, remember, we're in it. It is a calling. We came to this profession to lift kids up. If you're new to it, take that responsibility very seriously. Hone your craft. Get in there and really understand it, because standing in front of them and talking at them is not going to lift them up, right? It's let's circle them together and know their names and build the relationships and do the good work, because you have this honor of this calling. Make the best of it.
I love that. Reminds me, one of the first activities I do with educators, because I come in, they're like, oh God, this 12-year-old's gonna tell me about my life. And I always have them, I bring a generic puzzle piece, which means it can fit with any other puzzle piece I hand out. And on the puzzle piece, I invite educators at any range that they're of experience. Draw one story from any time in your life where you felt this is my line of work. I know this is for me. And so then when they all do it, then they share it with the person next to them. But then what we do is we put the whole puzzle together. So I've done it with 200 people in the room. And you see they put it all together, and the room just on that connection of, all right, whatever BS we got going in the room between admin and staff and staff, any of that kind of stuff, like, we're united in this is our calling.
And we have to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard. It's really challenging. The business of human beings is one of my favorite phrases is, you can't make this stuff up. I think you've heard me say this. And, people will come running into my office and say, this just happened. And I'll look at them and be like, you're serious right now? Yes, you can't make this stuff up. And so then I changed it to hashtag CMTSU. And I can never remember the letters. So now I've just made up my own word, Kimitsu. Just on a daily basis, you can't make it up. Kimitsu. You never know what you're going to get. But isn't that great?
Yes.
Every day, you don't know what you're walking into. So
that's wonderful. So there's a lot of questions I wanted to ask that I didn't get a chance to. So I hope we get to do a part 2.
That'd be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Definitely. So 3 last questions. As I'm like, we're wrapping up. 3 more questions. One is, whenever I have people on who actually know me, people are always like, get them to tell a Tom story. So is there any fun or embarrassing or anything, since you really intimately know me, that you can share with people out there about me beyond, when I say, if you really knew me, where we can turn the table, if people really, anything you want to share?
It's hard not to get sentimental.
You can get sentimental. Let's do it.
I think when I think of being an educator, and you guys were born when I was in high school, so you're border like you're my siblings, but I have this kind of like motherly feel, with you guys, a maternal feel with my siblings, with you guys. You've been on a journey, and I know you tell your story sometimes, but you even said it started in first grade, and to watch the growth that you've had and now see you so centered with a beautiful wife and family, living here in Los Angeles. I'm incredibly proud of the journey you've been on, and I think the work you do now is thanks to that journey. So it's something everybody can learn from you, is you have to live in your own journey and let it be what it's going to be. But at the end, something beautiful like you have now can be there, right?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And you were a crier as a baby. Our sister keeps asking me, because she just had a baby, and I'm like, oh, Tom would never go to bed.
Really?
I would have to pace with you and walk. Yeah, you were a crier. Huh. You're like, I was?
I'm making all these connections because for me, myself, if I don't have a system of going to bed, I get so much anxiety.
Interesting.
Like if I break my routine of I need to be in bed at this time, and so then now I'm like doing the self-reflection of, wow, this nurture thing is crazy, huh?
It's fun to think of you guys as kids now that you guys are all starting to think about having kids and having kids,
I appreciate that. When I think back, and I'm not blaming any adults in my life, so if any adults who cared for me are listening to this, and they're like, but I think of like when I was getting high all the time, and I was having all these problems, and I look back and think, God, it must have been so obvious, and yet nobody ever held me accountable or asked me about it. All the trouble I was getting in, high all the time, selling drugs, getting arrested, it never, like, nobody ever thought I had a problem, when I definitely did, and I appreciate that, like, I could never bullshit you. Like, there's so many specific times I remember trying, and you've been like, nope. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
That means a lot.
And it's interesting to hear you say that. I don't know where that comes from, but that's definitely something as an educator I've had to grow into, and I hear myself saying to like my administrative leadership all the time, be courageous, have the honest conversation. You will feel better. So will the teacher, so will the student. It's pretending it's not happening isn't going to make it go away or get better.
Yeah.
So
having that difficult.
I love you so much I couldn't help it.
I appreciate that. But I do think it's that ability to have that difficult conversation.
It takes humility. You have to be courageous.
And then the second thing I'll share, so now I'm sharing things with you. I appreciate that I got the chance for us to have an adult relationship.
Yes.
Because I think when I moved out here was whatever fit in my car, and my watermelons, like, can I stay with y'all?
Watermelons, jackfruit. Oh my God, it smells
durian.
So bad.
No, that's durian.
Oh, durian.
So I can't imagine what y'all thought was about to take place on your house. But
I was just happy for you.
I'm glad that we got to form this relationship we have like this. And the art we got to do together. So
we owe each other an art day.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
So I recommend that for people who out there, if y'all are busy and you want to form a relationship with somebody, even somebody that lives close to you and is your blood, that put it on the calendar and make it a ritual. So ours is that we try every once a month to do some collage art together.
A lot of life has been happening recently, but we'll get back in. Again, intentionally choosing that joy, right?
Agreed. So as you heard me say at the beginning, this is my year of grace. So it's to infuse my year with a certain intention, but also to start a conversation. So for you, what does grace look like in your life?
Truthfully, those moments, I'm going to stick with the education piece, those moments when you see it click for a student, I firmly believe the universe just keeps offering moments of grace. I told you the campus is becoming more and more international. I went to go check on a teacher who I knew needed some checking on the other day, and I walked into the classroom and I had been trying to find out who the sponsor of this new club was, and there's the kids in there. And it's because I wanted this group, they're a new group on campus that we didn't used to have a lot of students from this one particular country. They've created a group now on campus, and I walk into the room and I'm like, oh, the teacher was out, but the students were all there. And I said, guess what? I'm so proud of you guys. You have this new club. Would you like to go to the school board and speak? And the kids, the joy on their faces and the honor they felt to be able to say yes. They were texting me late last night on a Friday. What should we wear? What should we say? Do we bring a PowerPoint? Those are the moments of just pure grace and joy when you see a kid grab it and run with it. You can see my body change. It's pure grace. I love it. I love it.
That's wonderful. So for the folks out there who want to reach out to you and share with you how awesome you are and ask some questions or hire you to come speak, any of those kind of things, where can they do that?
On Instagram, it's DocJae, DocJae, and on Twitter, it's DocJae13, DocJae13.
Show notes today are timeroll.com/Jenn with 2 N's, timeroll.com/JENN, timeroll.com/Jenn with 2 N's. I want to thank you so much for making this happen. You really were the one who set the intention for it. And usually I'm trying to find people and you're like, let's do this. So
thank you.
And when I think of places where this is really happening, we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but that your school has this belief of ohana, where ohana means family. And no one gets left behind.
Yes, sir.
That you really model it. I love getting to go to your school. Young people that I've gotten to interact with from your school. I went to a spoken word event. There was just as many educators as students. You don't see that kind of stuff everywhere. So y'all are really living it, and you give everything you have to it. So
I have to.
So I appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Awkward transition. Before we leave, we should define what scaffolding is. I kept making a mental note because we kept saying scaffolding. So what is scaffolding?
Sure. To scaffold means that when you write a lesson, you intentionally create opportunities for all different kinds of learners in your classroom. So if there's a special needs student, they might need to have sentence starters on the board to be able to even have, or even second language students. Once they see the sentence starters on the board, then they're able to participate in the conversation. Whereas if you then have a general ed student who doesn't have those needs, what can you then have to kind of tack on to the activity? So it's offering extra levels and opportunities to engage in the lesson, depending on what the needs of the learner are.
Okay, awesome. Because I know we've been mentioning it, so I appreciate that.
You got it.
So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, I love you.
Love you more.
So our closing ritual is for you to share an invitation with the audience. What would you like to invite them to do, to be, to consider, to evolve into? What is your invitation? And for this one, we're going to look right at them.
I invite you every day to share joy. Choose joy. I know that I have to have a brave conversation today. When I'm stepping into my day, I can go into that thinking, oh my God, I have to talk to so-and-so today. Or I can choose to intentionally choose joy. That in that moment when I have that conversation, it's going to be lighter. We're going to see the truth. We're going to be able to work through it. you choose joy. And then every opportunity you have when you see something beautiful, share it. Because we all need joy. It might be too heavy today and I'm having a hard time choosing joy. So then share it. Someone might see what you share, if it's just personally in a conversation, or if it's online on social media, for example. You can make other people smile and help them see the joy too.
I love that.
Thanks.
Well, once again, sis, let's give it a hug. I love you too. Now we'll finish this and we're going to go have an awesome meal.
Yay!
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. As always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.